While you're learning about information system development, you should also know that information system development requires systematic management to make sure it gets done. Hence, your understanding of project management is critical. Through project management, we are ensuring that an information system project gets done on time, within budget, and while meeting or exceeding all the user requirements, which is also referred to as project scope. Now, a project is a collection of tasks that need to be completed within an allocated time. Some tasks depend on the completion of other to be started, and this is called as task dependency or predecessors. Now, let's take an example to see the concept of tasks and tasks dependency. Let's assume we want to build a system for a company to help them with automating their customer billing. This means that the system would calculate bills based on customer purchase, help with payments, and storing data regarding customers, their purchases, and account information. To make this system, let's see, what do we need to do? Now, it is always a good idea to start talking to the company and their employees first to understand how the billing process is done currently. So we would start by interviewing the company employees, followed by reading the company reports to see if the employees have missed something to tell us during the interviews. Now, researching existing solutions and how other companies are doing the billing system or automating the billing system is always a good idea. So we will plan to do that as well. Once we have all the data with us, we would go ahead and analyze the system requirements to understand what do we need to build and then make a project plan around that. With the project plan in place, we will be ready to then design the system, and with the design in hand, we would be able to develop and test the system before its implementation and user training. Once all of this is complete, we will go ahead and close our project. Now, these 8 listings you are seeing in front of you is an example of project tasks, and each task needs to be completed for this whole project to be considered as complete. Now, each task would take a certain amount of time to complete. For example, interviewing the company employees, we estimate it's going to take us 2 weeks. Reading company reports will take 1 week. Researching existing solutions would take 1 week. Analyzing requirements and making project plan is a big task, so we estimate it to take about 4 weeks. Designing the system usually takes a lot longer. That's why we estimate it to be completed in 8 weeks, followed by the development in 6 weeks and implementation in 2 weeks. We expect that a project closing would take about 1 week to make sure that we have delivered everything that was due on our part before we collect repayment. This is the example of task duration in our project plan. Now, all these tasks do not need to be carried out sequentially. There are some tasks that we can start together, and there are some tasks that depend on other tasks to be completed first before we can start them. Let's look at an example. Let's say if we start off with interviewing the company employees and reading company reports, we can start them together. But to research existing solutions, we need to have the interview notes and the company reports understanding with us. Hence, we cannot research existing solutions and making task C dependent on the completion of task A and B. To analyze the requirements, we have to make sure that we have already researched existing solutions, so task D is dependent on task C. To design the system, we should have our project plan and requirements analysis with us, so task E is dependent on task D. To develop the system, we need to have a design, hence task F is dependent on task D as well as task E. To implement the system, we need to have it developed and tested, so task G is dependent on task F, and to close the project, we have to make sure that the project is implemented and the user trainings are completed. Hence, task H is dependent on task G. This is the example of task dependency. Now, as you can see, not all tasks are sequential. Hence, the duration of the project is not the sum of all the task durations. To find the project duration, we would create a network diagram to explore the dependency of a task to finally figure out how long will it take us to complete this project. Now, if you remember, we determined that task A and task B could be started in parallel, so they were not dependent on any other task to be completed. but task C was dependent on the completion of task A as well as task B. Similarly, task D was dependent on the completion of task C. So task C is connected, D is connected with task C. Task E was dependent on the completion of task D, but task F was dependent on the completion of task E as well as task D. We couldn't have started task G without completing task F, and the last phase, which is closing of the project, depended on the completion of task G. Now, each task that is listed here has its own duration. Now, in a network diagram that you're seeing in front of you, the tasks are represented in the form of nodes, when nodes are connected with arrows. With a network diagram in place, we try to figure out how many unique paths are there or available in our diagram. Now, let's start figuring out the paths. The first path would include the connection between task A and C, then task C and D, D and E and F and G and H. If we sum up the duration of each task included in this particular task, that would come up to approximately at 24 weeks. So let's write this down so we don't forget it. So our first path duration is about 24 weeks. Now, the second path would not be very different from our first path. The only difference would be that there are possible two paths between task D and F, going through E or directly from D to F. So if we sum up the durations of tasks A, C, D, F, G, and H, it would come up to 17 weeks. So let's write this one down as well. Our second path is giving us the duration of 7 weeks. Now the third path starts from task B because A and B can be started in parallel. So the third path would consist of task B, C, D, E, F, G, and H. And the sum of the duration of these tasks in this particular path comes to approximately 23 weeks. Let's write this down. 23 weeks. And the fourth and the last path does not have task E in it. Instead, it's D and F. So the duration of the last path or the fourth path is about 15 weeks. Now, as you can see, each path is giving us different duration. Now, the duration of a project is determined by looking at what is the longest time a particular path is giving us. Among all four options that we have in front of us, our first option is giving us 24 weeks, and this is the duration of our project, also known as the critical. So a critical path is the longest path that is given to us in a network diagram, and it is the shortest amount of time that a project will take to complete. So in conclusion, in this lecture, we have learned about the basics of project management, the concepts of tasks and task dependency, how to determine a project duration once you have the information about the tasks and their dependencies through a critical path method.